Hello from the land of TV. This is King Kool. Welcome to my top 10 best and worst films of 2025. No honorable mentions this year. We're going to cover most of them as we go. Let's start with the best list. Oh, and a quick spoiler, a comic movie will be back at the top. In 2007, Michael Townsend was charged with trespassing in the Providence Place Mall when it was discovered that he had constructed an apartment within the bowels of the mall itself. The apartment had apparently existed for 4 years. Even for a local Rhode Islander, this was the most of the story that I'd ever heard until very recently. Now, when I had a friend in contact who worked at the theater that was in the Providence Place Mall, I got to get a little more details to the story. But the real story was a little more complicated than the rumors. Townsend, a local artist, and similarly aligned friends who had not previously been identified, found the space in the mall, brought up some things, brought up a couch and a TV and even a PlayStation 2, and just sort of constructed a little space for themselves. The space didn't have water service or anything like this, but they were able to put up a door, that universal symbol of saying, "This space is mine." I remember hearing some people talk about this apartment as if it was an art project, and as a lifelong Philistine, I always balked at that explanation. But this film helps express that particular point of view. For one, the apartment was nobody's home. They all had homes, as far as I know. It had just enough furniture for a handful of people to exist in the space, not live there permanently. It was not a permanent residence. This was just mostly young people finding an empty space and wondering what to do with it and if they could do this. And they made it, and it took 4 years for anyone in the mall to eventually figure it out. If someone builds something in my house and it didn't notice it for 4 years, I think that's a me problem. I can't just be like, I've wondered why I can't see my TV lately because someone put a wall in front of it. I've just been kind of wondering, gosh. Outside of the apartment, Townsend likes to make sculptures, if you will, of silhouettes on blank walls with blue painter's tape. I think my father just told me that the people who make blue painter's tape are ceasing production or something. I gotta look into that. Okay, so about 3 years ago, I went to the RISD store, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from the mall. I normally go to Jerry's Artorama, which is a little bit further down the way. This is very close to it. So I was looking around to see what they had, and I found some of these particular sketchbooks. These are 9 inches by 3 inches. And you look at them and you're like, what could you possibly do with these things except make comic strips, right? With 3 even panels? So that's what I've been doing lately, and I've done a comic every day for 16 months. At first I was just kind of doing whenever the inspiration struck me. But then maybe there was a particular former football player who said he wanted to make comics with AI with his money. And I'm like, you got money to just hire artists. You can make whatever the hell you want. But he wants to do it with AI to democratize art or whatever. That whole extremely tedious chestnut. And this was August 2024. So this is before this got so tedious. Sometimes the medium makes the art. The space available to you makes the art. I've painted some paintings just because I had an idea that would perfectly fit a canvas that I had in a certain scale. I haven't really painted that much since I started doing the comics every day. That kind of scratched the itch for me. I don't know what Townsend will do if he actually loses his supply of his beloved blue painter's tape. Maybe he's sitting on a big box of it somewhere and can last for a little while, but it doesn't last forever. But then neither does his art because it can just be pulled right down. It's meant to be temporary. I really can't imagine what would happen if I was unable to do this. Obviously pencils and pens aren't going away anymore, but this particular thing, I think I've got it right here. Hold on, I have this in front of this. So, because I was a little afraid I would run out of those things, I have these. These are 6 extra books I have that I was able to find. These are not that easy to find. When I run out of these books, I don't know what I'm going to continue to do. I got to keep looking for them or whatever. So it is kind of a bit of an existential thing there. None of these comics are online at the moment. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. Sitting on all these things, I kind of feel bad for possibly taking them away from someone else. I feel like a dragon sitting on a hoard. but I do really want to keep making them in this particular way. You know, I don't really like drawing on a computer. I like doing it on paper, and I like this particular style. You know, I like this a lot. It's inspired me. I didn't think I'd be the kind of guy who could do a comic every single day, and I've done it for over a year. It's pretty cool. I could easily spin this into my #1 of the year if I wanted to sort of protect my hipster bona fides. But with this movie, when we stopped seeing the footage that they were taking as they were making the apartment, as they grew comfortable and they no longer had new things to sort of express about the apartment, and it just became a space to exist in, and the art was itself sort of complete, they stopped filming themselves, and then the movie sort of has to take over a little bit with like recreations and other things, and the movie gets a little bit shaky and a little bit stretchy. It does kind of just sort of barely get to like the full length thing. There may not have been enough footage taken back in the day on their crummy little camcorder to fill up a whole thing, but they have to pull it just a touch. In fact, they do have footage of other art pieces that were in seldom explored places in the city that I guess wouldn't be seen at all ever anymore, because I'm sure those have all been destroyed. And it's very nice to see those, that they've been preserved in some way at least. So when the mall itself went into receivership and changed owners, the new owners weren't quite as grumpy at Townsend apparently as the original ones were. They set up some of the tape sculptures for him to make when the movie was about to come out, and they even made a replica of the apartment in the movie theater with a couch and a PS2 and everything. Someone stole their copy of San Andreas out of the thing. I don't know how they got to it. Everything was bolted down pretty good. I wonder if they ever played Guitar Hero in there. It would have been about that time. I don't think it was the premiere, but there was a premiere actually at the mall itself. And I was actually there that day. I think it was the day after I'd gone to see 2 other movies, but I had to leave because that was the day they announced the lower forums were closing. So I was like, okay, I gotta go. I came back the next day and I was like, can I slip into this movie because I didn't get to see it? I think that was the day that was all happening. And I was a little nervous about talking to anybody, but I kind of sort of wish I had, but, you know. This was March 15th, which might line up with my ticket stub. Again, there probably was more than one, premiere. And thus, this mall played the movie about once a week, every Tuesday, for months, until the theater itself switched hands to a new brand, and they got rid of it. No shade on the new owners, like, the movie had its time. But what happened of the space that was the apartment? Do they use it for storage? Is there an extra tiny Macy's in there just for the borrowers? Do they finally use the space? Do they bollocks? It's as fallow as it was when they stopped this thing 18 years ago. What is it? Is this that, video game executive guy from Smiling Friends? I can't allow them to make an independent Wimley game. It's my IP to sit on and do nothing with. This leads into the larger themes of gentrification. And how artists need to live somewhere to do art. Of course, there's one other big problem with this movie, I'm afraid. So they show the PlayStation 2 that they were playing in the apartment, and they show the PlayStation 2 boot. But dubbed onto it, you can hear, it goes PlayStation, which was a soundbite from PlayStation 1 commercials. It's not the boot sound of the PlayStation 2 or the PlayStation 1. The PlayStation 2's boot sound is the lovely soft whoom, which might not stand out in the audience and doesn't say its own name like a Pokemon, but that is clearly dubbed in later to emphasize, I guess, people who aren't looking at the screen. A 0 out of 10 movie would not recommend. Absolutely unwatchable. One of the reviews on IMDb says, and I quote, one of the greatest documentaries of all time, 9 out of 10. I guess they're leaving a little bit of headroom in case they find a documentary that slices, dices, and juliennes and all scratches your back. I don't know. Keke Palmer had 2 comedies this year, one of which I actually had to go to Boston to see because I missed it when it was in Providence. Good Fortune is a very weird movie, but at least seems to be aware of the struggles of certain people of a certain age at a certain period of time, that time being right now when everything sucks. Not so many of the actual participants in the movie were ever so destitute that they were living out of their car and showering at the gym, but nevertheless. Palmer and the writer-director Aziz Ansari were in the break room of their local big box hardware store, and Keke Palmer's like, hey, do you want us to try to sign this thing to help us unionize? And Aziz is like, What? No. Dude, if Keke Palmer asks you to do something, you do it. Here you go, honey. Take this baby and throw it into that mechanical grinder. It's like, okay, at least I don't have to change diapers now. If we found out that Keke Palmer was literally the devil herself, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. I have no other explanation for how damn charming she is. Remember Sean Evans was talking about like how he was falling in love with her during the Hot Ones thing? And I'm like, yeah, man, I get it. So Keke Palmer is a known quantity, and she elevates this material quite a bit. But the real surprise here is SZA. SZA is a revelation in what is evidently her first acting performance. She's keeping pace with Palmer, and the two of them are terrific together. Now, this is still an R-rated comedy, and there's some gross-out humor. Some of it I did have to look away from, because I'm like, ooh, I don't want to see that. But it's never purposeless, and it only gets that kind of gross a couple of times. And also, most of the characters aren't like irredeemable jerks throughout the whole thing, the way we've seen populated in R-rated comedies for the last who knows how long. These people are a lot easier to understand. It's all about our girls trying to catch a break and trying to make up a little bit of scratch before the situation gets even worse and they become even more destitute. So they get a little bit desperate, and it is generally pretty funny. Not that the desperation is funny, but sometimes their pie-eyed ideas and their attempts to try to make this work, again, you just want to root for them. That's the main thing. You want them to win. If I'm not mistaken, both this and Good Fortune kind of have endings where they say, I hope you have a friend with a lot of money, which isn't that realistic. I'd say it was a Deus Ex Machina, but if you say that on YouTube, a ding immediately appears, and you're like, you don't want that. Ugh. Have they finally stopped, like, being popular? Please tell me some of you have finally gotten over that crap. Alright, The Day the Earth Blew Up was going to be on this list, but it got knocked off by a different animated feature later on in the year. Not this one, though I do want to talk about The Day the Earth Blew Up a little bit right now. The Day the Earth Blew Up is a Looney Tunes movie with Porky and Daffy and essentially nobody else. This time the two of them are lifelong adopted siblings, I guess, who grew up under this farmer's tutelage, and they are brought together to try to stop an alien invasion. This movie is kind of like Looney Tunes by way of Ren and Stimpy, including like the painted close-ups and things like this. The sort of gross-out style where a lot of it is about like this gum-chewing thing that spreads around to make sort of gross-out stuff while still being like not like really gross, just sort of slimy. All the close-up needed was like a foghorn to indicate that someone is meant to be unattractive, and this would be very Ren and Stimpy coded. Both characters are voiced by voice actor Eric Bauza. You know, his Porky is good, not great, but his Daffy is perfect, essentially. And I hope he gets to play Daffy forever at this point. It is essentially flawless. As it is supporting any Looney Tunes movie actually coming out to the mainstream that's not a friggin' Space Jam sequel, should be everyone's priority. The world of Looney Tunes is so vivid and beautiful that we should totally share all these things with our future generations, so long as we watch them ahead again and make sure we don't show them the racist ones. Meanwhile, Dogman is a chimera of a policeman and a dog who apparently were in an accident, in order to save each other's life, had to become this sort of dog-man hybrid thing. But he got to keep his job, I guess, even though he can't talk anymore. Dogman's nemesis, the twisted but resourceful Petey the Cat, continues to vex this new super cop. No matter what he tries, he just can't seem to stop Dogman. What could he possibly do to finally stop this man? He'd need to be in two places at once. And thus, Petey decides to clone himself. Isn't that just the rub? In order for forces to unite in virtue, they must lose bits of themselves to sort of unify into one force. But when evil wants to proliferate, it doesn't really matter if there's many differences in these things, that they all seem to want to gather in for their twisted means. You see lots of people who you don't think would join earnest fascism because they don't really fit the muscle. They don't fit the uniform, so to speak, but they continue to go in because they're simply willing to throw their body at serving some thing like this. I don't necessarily get it. And to unify forces against that, people always have to like, oh, this person doesn't quite fit the sniff test and throw them out. And I'm like, isn't that just the story? Or maybe it's just an actual story about a dog and a man become a dog man, and I'm going way too far into this. I mean, dog chases cat. You know, we've seen it. Maybe I stepped out of line a couple years ago when I gave Captain Underpants one of the top spots on my list. I still think that movie is funny. I asked for a sequel, but we ended up not getting it. But we did get Dogman, and I like this one even more than I liked Captain Underpants. It got released in like late January, I think, which is an unusual time for a kids movie like this to be released. Maybe the things that make it unorthodox and make me like it more were the things that might have given the producers cold feet about it. Not to give away the twists and turns that happen in this movie for literal babies, but the plot sort of unfolds in a way I didn't expect. Perhaps a bit closer to The Wild Robot from whatever year that was. There are 14 Dogman books. Maybe I should write kids' books. Alright, this is why The Day the Earth Blew Up didn't make the list. I think remember a couple years ago when I was like, oh, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On should win the Best Animated Picture. I completely forgot at that time that there was the Pinocchio stop motion, whatever. Like, okay, so Marcel was never going to win that year. So after people never shut up about this movie for a long time, I finally was like, alright, let me see what the big deal is. And I watched it on Netflix on New Year's Eve, which I think was the only time I used Netflix all f***ing year. While everyone else was watching the Stranger Things finale, I'm sitting here watching K-Pop Demon Hunters, which is like 7 months old at this point. Remember when I said I watched that Cameron Diaz, Jamie Foxx movie? Lol, no I didn't. So I've been famously sort of lukewarm about the Spider-Verse movies. Considering their pedigree and who makes them, I don't really know what's keeping me out. It's got the same sort of wild animation style, although it might be toned down just a little bit. And it all centers around K-pop, something which I know absolutely nothing about. I mean, I know it's music, but other than that, nothing. But the story is also about 3 superhero demon-killing women, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of up my alley. I think it's a little less silly than the Spider-Verse movies. You might think that would hurt it, but the storytelling is actually pretty strong. And needless to say, the music is excellent. Sometimes they do like stylized faces and things in this movie. I'm not certain that I think that that works all the way through, but they don't do it enough. They usually do it briefly to illustrate annoyance or other thing. Only one sequence where they really draw attention to it. And obviously not just an affect like it is with counterfeit crapola like Teen Titans or whatever, when they would go anime style or whatever. I think I did like the effects when it emphasized the obvious exhaustion that these poor women are working with, where they have to deal with all the travails of being a K-pop star and trying to save the world. I think it's fun when it emphasizes the obvious exhaustion these poor girls are dealing with. Trying to be a K-pop idol is really tough work, but I also gotta save the world? As if... Kids still say that, right? Our heroines have to try to deal with staying popular, but they face an enormous obstacle. A band made of nothing but beautiful boys. There's only 3 of our heroines, and the boy band has 5 members at this point. 5 boys against 3 girls doesn't sound fair to the guys. I've got some quibbles here or there, but by the end of the movie, the story really takes off, and I was in. But the moment our heroes decide that the proper response to these polished, prim, proper conmenam is to write a diss track. Look, things might be different societally in Korea, but a diss track is really hard to get right. And if you get it wrong, you can just look like the biggest bitches. Now, I try not to say words like this anymore, but that's exactly what it would be, surely. And I knew it was going to go wrong somehow. What you do is you do it like Criss Cross did. You mention them once at the outset, and then you rap out how great you are or whatever afterwards. The 2 young men in Criss Cross were 13 when they first had their largest known hit when that came out. And they were roughly the same age as all the members of another group, Another Bad Creation, who had preceded them. And Criss Cross said at the opening of their song, "Now don't compare us to another bad little fad," etc. Sadly, the song they come up with that one, which is called Takedown, is by far my favorite song in the movie. Like, some people really like Soda Pop, which is the one from the boy band. I would have called it Cotton Candy because it just didn't stick with me at all. I was a little surprised that the singing wasn't done by the actors in this one. Our main hero is voiced by a singer, but the voice for her is done by the main songwriter, evidently. But it's not like anybody who grew up, even if you grew up as an actor, or even if you grew up as a theater singer, that you can necessarily match the force and precision that is expected in K-pop. You have got wider tolerances when you're designing a turbine for a jet engine than you have when singing K-pop. That might be why some of it's a little too polished for me to really appreciate. I did like APT, that one song. I was talking with a friend of a friend, and she said that the K-pop industry is apparently only slightly less ethical than the tobacco industry. I mean, it's music, who's really shocked? Maybe in 50 years we'll think about this the way we think of traditional Westerns, as far as lionizing people who are in a system that shouldn't exist. But in 2025, I'm like, no, this is a lot of fun. I dig it. It's fun. I'm still sort of got some of them stuck in my head. Somebody just commented on YouTube on one of the videos they posted on YouTube, which did get 1 billion views, which is a pretty narrow amount of time to get 1 billion views. And they said, oh, the Hunman is healed forever now. And I said, until the sequel. They were not happy with that. Oh boy. That's finally over. I can finally stop putting these on the best list like some kind of normie. I really want to make room for Last Breath on the best list. That's a movie about a maritime disaster, about a big storm that takes a boat and moves it away from this gas platform, and the terrifying things are going down beneath the surface as the boat up top drifts way away from the station they're supposed to be at. It's one of those movies that just crushes you with dread as time ticks on. Every second inestimably valuable when you're underwater. It shows you don't really need to be in outer space to be lost, like All Is Lost, or even The Shallows. You don't need to be that far away from land to be hopelessly lost. But I do have to give it to this fine finale to this long-running series. It does have the bit of a feeling of a legacy sequel, despite these movies not having ever left us for longer than 6 years. Not exactly Top Gun Maverick over here. This movie has a lot of very good action, a lot of sequences of Tom Cruise attempting to commit suicide on camera. We do actually have a little bit of continuity in here, not just with the previous movie either, with the whole series. They do attribute a purpose to the MacGuffin from Mission Impossible 3. I kind of don't like that they've kind of settled on what that is, but I guess in the last part, it's now or never. But that also takes away some of the spice from J.J. Abrams' incredibly tedious mystery box horse crap. So I think that's fine. We do have events and other things recalled from other series a lot better than, let's say, like No Time to Die ever did. You know, they sort of know they're wrapping it up. And I think it does it in a better way than No Time to Die ever did with its continuity and with a smaller body count, let's just say. If you got to go one-on-one with these two movies, this one beats No Time to Die handily. One character we have finally coming back is actually the greatest return after 30 years of exile since Lyman, which we talked about last year. It's definitely something I didn't see coming. I don't know if they gave it away in the trailers or not. I don't think so. And it's a better legacy sequel, if you want to call it that, than Karate Kid Legends. Now, in that one, they do actually try to explain why the Karate Kid in 2011 was about Kung Fu, with a sequence with Mr. Miyagi in it. And I'm like, is this something from the movie that I don't remember or something from something else? I don't know how they had that, because he's been gone a very long time. I hope it's not some sort of weird deep fake or something. Mission Impossible 8 does start more abruptly than The Matrix Revolutions does, but if you're coming into it with this without having seen any of the previous parts, you're just being silly. This movie does start more abruptly than Matrix Revolutions, but if you're coming in this late and you hadn't seen any of the previous ones, you're coming in now, you're just a weirdo, or you're trying to get out of the rain. I remember hearing someone talk about Rise of Skywalker, and they were like, they weren't really that familiar with a lot of Star Wars stuff, and they were like, who was the old guy in that movie? And it's like, oh yeah, if you don't know who Palpatine is, this movie's really weird, isn't it? I mean, it's partially their fault for coming back, but I think you could easily watch 7, 8, 9, and then still be like, well, who is this guy? You know, because nothing else had supported that up until that point, because that obviously wasn't the plan until they did that. This apparently is the one we're going to just take pot shots at J.J. Abrams for this whole thing. You know, Mission Impossible 3, which actually was the most I've liked one of his movies, that was, what's their asses? Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Urzi were the ones in that. That's kind of where they got their big start in Hollywood. And before that, they were on the friggin' Hercules show with that whole thing. Evidently, at some point, what's his ass? I'm about to say Kevin Feige. Kevin Sorbo got sick for a little while. He had a stroke. It sucks. I'm glad he's recovered. No matter what he's done now, that would be a little too soon to go out with a stroke. But nevertheless, they had to come up with stories without him, and that's when they became showrunners or whatever. And so I'm like, well, one more thing we can hang on Kevin Sorbo, I guess. Jesus. But just like The Matrix, this movie is fighting against the world-threatening scourge that is AI. And that is a mission that you must choose to accept. So Sinners isn't going to make the top 10 list this year. It probably would have been flexed into 10 if Secret Mall Apartment didn't take that spot. Now, don't get me wrong. I still think that Sinners is truly excellent, and it demands everyone's attention for it's being shot very well, written very well, and honestly, one of the best performances from an actor playing a set of twins since, The Social Network. It's very jazzy, very American, and very black. We need movies like this. But the fact is, I appreciate it more than I enjoy it. I have at least one friend for whom this movie swam in her blood for the rest of the entire year, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to put this at the top of their best list. Not me. I didn't really think of it that much after I saw it. But I don't want any of the nasty anti-woke crowd to think that I'm a member of their piteous ranks. So I'm going to give it a special spot right there. We'll give it number 11. Let's add that to the list right there. There we go, just to show that we appreciate it. Maybe this will be a new thing I did, like I did that one year with 2022, when I recommended The Woman King, even though it wasn't on the top 10 list as far as being the movie that didn't quite make the list, that is still most worthy of attention. But everyone knows about Sinners at this point, right? Even if you don't think it's your speed. And it's not my speed. It's not a lot of my speeds, but it's still absolutely worth a watch. So Jack Quaid had a pretty good year, eh? He hung with the 5 Second Films guys, he hung with the Red Letter Media guys, and something called The Boys? Maybe it's an indie drama, I haven't heard of it. He had an action movie called Novocaine, where he plays a fella who has chronic insensitivity to pain, and thus becomes the world's most reluctant action hero. There's some great moments in this movie, but the main villain is just kind of boring. If the movie had more explicitly acknowledged the fact that this guy's frustrated with our hero because he can't hurt him, that would have been kind of fun. He also says he drinks all his nutrition because he can't feel his tongue if he was to chew and he could bite his tongue off. I don't know if that's true. The condition is extremely rare, so I don't know if that's actually true. I think as far as pain, as far as feeling, that kind of thing is a little different. So I think that's made up for the movie, but that's no big sweat. A few months before that, they had Companion. Companion is about a woman who loves Jack Quaid and gets to go on a vacation with him. Lucky her. It turns out his friends who are also on vacation with him are kind of not the sort of people you'd want to be on vacation with, especially the benefactor of this vacation, a rather unethical, wealthy man who sees everything before him as his property, including her. No big surprises here. Your girlfriend and your friends don't get along. But it gets so much worse than that. They get in some deep, deep trouble that not even her endless love can get them out of. On this trip, she learns what sort of woman she really is, and she begins to learn to put herself first, rather than being objectified. This is another January release that made the top list. I'm surprised. The director's previous effort was Barbarian, which I didn't really like, but I'm not surprised that they eventually made something that was more up my alley. This is a strong year, for movies anyway. Alright, Wes Anderson's back on top, and he didn't even have to have ScarJo get nude to do it. So far, that's not landed things on the best list. The only one time there was, one didn't make it, and one was the worst list. So, I mean, I'm not here to discourage these sort of things, though. I'm like, if they want to keep trying, you can see, but so far we're 0 for 2, so. The Phoenician Scheme follows Anatole Jaja Korda, an arms dealer who survives an assassination attempt, and thus begins to think about his legacy. He attempts to reinsert himself into the life of his grown daughter, while simultaneously attempting a new business enterprise that takes him all across the world and into the hands of many unscrupulous characters. But Korda is not about to be outdone or outwitted. Korda is a real negotiator, getting himself out of more situations than Michael Por Sorrentino's boyfriend in the universe where he's gay. What the f*** am I writing about here? I think I knew I would love this movie at the very start, where Korda's back and he has many kids. He's talking to his adult daughter, and at one point up from the balcony someone fires one of them little arrows, in the little bow and arrow kits you get as a kid, but it jams into this box pretty sharply. He pulls it out and it comes to a point, and he just says, this is supposed to have a suction cup. And how he offers anyone he meets a hand grenade the way you might offer someone a bottle of water. He's far, far more interesting than all of our modern despots. Do you remember when our unscrupulous billionaires were actually charismatic? When they were interested in building something that wasn't just more wealth? Even those that claim to build something nowadays usually just buying it or taking it from someone else. Elon Musk. I'm talking about Elon Musk. As if buying something makes you the creator of it. I made these chicken nuggets because I got them from DoorDash. Sure, that's how it works. Just like the AI prompters, the whiny baby over at Microsoft is saying we should stop saying slop. Well, then maybe you should stop being a pig. There was just that Discord thing. This was yesterday. It was I'm filming on the 11th. It was the 10th. And Discord was like, hey, we're taking a survey about what you want to say about AI. And before the day was up, it was already down by 8 o'clock because they must have gotten such a negative response. And I was like, literally like, they'd better do one of them things where it says, okay, we heard you. We'd better get one of those lame-ass responses from that. Where was I? I'd never heard of Mia Threppleton before this. I don't know if I even pronounced her name right, but she's a pillar of grace and patience in this movie as the estranged daughter of Zsa Zsa. Pretty much every Wes Anderson movie is very well cast, but Benicio del Toro, Threppleton, and Michael Cera, who we sometimes forget about, are all fantastic here. It's about time we had a bad guy that was actually worth rooting for. I mean, maybe he's not, but at least he's compelling. Brendan Fraser continues his renaissance. Here he plays Philip, an American actor who's lived in Japan for 7 years. He gets picked up by a rental family service, a real thing in Japan where people apparently are brought in to stand in for social obligations. For example, as Philip does in this movie, he fills in for both a wedding and a funeral. The wedding service that Philip is here to fill in for, as the groom, no less, that sort of service apparently costs about 5 million yen, about 32 grand in American bucks. No wonder this whole thing gets treated like the big deal when Philip starts to get a little nervous about the whole thing. He's eventually brought in as the father of a biracial girl and told to pretend to be her father so that she can get into the highest early education possible. Something that is evidently not guaranteed if the father is absent. They don't let the girl in on the gag, and this becomes a very dangerous game that they begin to play, with the elevated social expectations that come from life in Japan. I don't know what I'd do if anyone expected anything of me. I'm going to eat more of this McDonald's out of the garbage. If you told me this movie had made all this up, I would have believed it. But no, evidently, just like with The Farewell from a couple years back, this is a real thing that happens in this culture. And it's great and terrific to have a movie that sort of highlights the way that our cultures are different. Evidently, some people go to these rental family services to hire people to help the hikikomori in their lives, people who are deeply socially withdrawn and isolated. They hire these contractors to come out and help these people come out of their shells, like luring a feral kitten out of a sewer drain with tuna baby food. It's not meant to be mean-spirited or a form of con artistry, but it can be destructive, just like anything else in the world, like red meat, or video games, or pornography. It's a way that shows how the heavy social expectations in Japan can cut both ways. Japan apparently has the lowest amount of homelessness in the world. This is for a multitude of reasons, but people just don't seem to slip through the cracks the way they do in America. According to Wikipedia, some rental services in Japan induce their customers to cry to release bottled up emotions for catharsis. But please, save your money. Just watch this movie instead. This is the second place on a list where I get it if you don't like this. The last time was Uncut Gems, and like I'm sticking by that one, but it was, what now, 6 years ago? Oh my man. That's pre-COVID, oh my god. And this isn't quite up to that level, but really what is? I haven't seen Marty Supreme at the time of filming this. If it turns out it was going to make it, it's too late now. Whoopsie doopsie. As it was, I gave this particular director a 10-year break after The Lobster, which I famously hated. I don't know what I've missed, but I'm glad I made time for this one. Begonia is about two men who kidnap a CEO because they believe her machinations will lead to the end of humanity. I mean, she's a CEO, so she might be wrecking the world either way, so broken clocks and such. When I say two men believe that she's not what she appears to be, what I mean to say is one of them believes that she isn't what she appears to be, and one of the men believes him. One of them, I suppose, has the excuse of being misled by someone that he trusts, where the other person has less excuse for his delusion and him trusting the opinions of other people he probably shouldn't have. But the only thing more dangerous than a solitary person who has plans to execute on his delusions is when he has a weak-willed friend whom he can inflict and codify his worldview onto. the Washington, D.C. sniper, the Columbine shooters, there was the leader, and there was the follower. With the follower confirming the rightness of the leader's megalomania and the fantasies of his omnipotence. Someone once compared this psychological phenomenon to the dynamic between Narcissus and Echo, and that is extremely apt. Jesse Plemons is perfectly cast in this movie as a man who can spout bull crap in essentially any direction like a sprinkler, and has had his entire worldview filled out by total wackos. He's so confident that he's invariably polite. It's like a confident history teacher, like very patiently explaining something to the strange kid. Meanwhile, Emma Stone's character is also remarkable. We very rarely see CEOs that are any good at their job. I don't mean just in the movies, I mean, in general. In the brief interaction she has with the coworkers at the start of the film, you see her, what might be considered performative compassion. And you don't know if she really wants to try to wield her power responsibly or if she's been pushed into this role against her will. She's just a little bit cagey about everything, especially when thrown into this unusual situation. Some people will look at this movie as if there's only two possible conclusions to it. Same way people looked at like The Last Guardian and said, oh, well, either the cute monster dies or the cute kid dies. As if that's the f***ing point. The point of this is that our society makes bitter little men like our deuteragonist, the way a grain mill makes dust. Not everyone goes down quite so far as he did, but there's also a certain point where a lot of the guardrails apparently have been removed because someone didn't like the color yellow or something. Be it a CEO who's been given far too much sway on the future of our planet. Some random destitute fool who thinks he has all the hidden answers because he's deeply credulous. Or perhaps a busybody woman who called the constabulary on an automobile factory under construction and sent the entire deal down the plug. One person has the ability to ruin everything. I said before that a comic movie would be at the top, but which one? No, it's not Thunderbolts. Like, Thunderbolts is fine, but it really just feels like when you have like a bunch of leftover toys, like most of them broke, so you have like one Ninja Turtle and one Lego guy and one Crash Dummy, and you're like, well, this is what I got, I guess they gotta play together now. Based on like some of my friends like this, you might think like maybe that would be really up my speed, but it didn't work out that way. I don't hate it by any means. And, like, maybe the sadder tone was appropriate for this year, but it's also just quite downbeat, and I think I would rather have had some bit of escapism, something lighter. And they killed a version of a character that I really liked very unceremoniously. Getting kind of tired of this shit, Marvel. They did it with Stryker, they did it with Claw, they did it with Zola. I mean, Claw and Zola are transhumanists. They might come back at some point, but I think Stryker's gone for good. And no, it's not Superman either. Like, Superman is more successful than I sort of feared it would be. But I don't think some of these choices for these characters are going to be good for the wider world. I don't really like this sort of self-doubt that Superman has at this point, especially if we're not starting it at the start of his career when he's young. He's been established for a little while, but there's all this other stuff he's sort of doing. I remember someone talking about, like, Marvel characters are the ones you relate to, and DC characters are the ones you admire. And so I think giving Superman this sort of flaw, I think, is kind of missing the point. And I don't care what anyone says, this version of Lois Lane is a shrew. The argument the two of them have at the start of this movie is awful, and I don't want them together anymore. Bring Lana Lane in here, whatever. Bring back Kristen Kirk. Bring back that girl who went to jail for Nixium. I don't care. Anyone is better than this. And must we always do the whole thing where it's like, hey there, Superman, I have created a plan that you cannot possibly escape from, and then it's like, I escaped from it. God damn, I think I might have liked Black Adam more than this. Not the movie necessarily, but the character, at least he knew what he was about, But at the end of Superman, I do like the reveal of a new character. I'm not going to bother with spoilers here because we know this movie's coming out now, but they introduced Supergirl, and she like went to a planet without a yellow sun so she could get drunk. She comes home kind of all turned whatever, and the Crypto's like playing with her and slamming her to the ground and cracking the floor of the fortress while she's just sitting there laughing. Like, okay, yeah, messy party girl, Supergirl, I can kind of get behind. I think this could be cool. And yeah, Fantastic Four is pretty good. It's the best Fantastic Four movie we've seen so far. It's great to see a real version of this particular villain they had in this movie, but it's not top 10 material. I remember at some point in the movie they're like, okay, in order to avoid this particular fate, we're going to take Earth and we're going to move it out of space to somewhere else. And I'm like, that's your solution? So, like, I was like, that was just very daffy. But, I mean, that sort of fits the tone of, like, the 60s style, super science-y, almost Venture Brother kind of thing, where it's like, yeah, just, when you have, like, the power of science, you can do literally anything. Then what comic book movie is left? Yes, this movie does rely a lot on the external media to the MCU, essentially a sequel to Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I mean, I haven't seen it, I ain't got Disney Plus, but I was able to pick up most of it just from watching it from context and other things I heard about with these other things. We have characters coming in back from that show, and we have a Cap that is navigating the complicated post-Thanos world, and they bring back a lot of things from other movies and things we didn't expect to see back at any point. And I don't think they cavalierly kill anybody in this movie like they did in Thunderbolt, so it's great to emphasize that a vivid and, yes, diverse crew is how we fight for American values. There are some threats about them possibly making a Latin Captain America, and I am 1000% down for that. Do you think we'd have these stormtrooper doughboys walking around literally killing some of our citizens if we had this guy walking around? I don't think so. Yes, it's a little unfortunate we couldn't do the storyline without Bill Hurt, who passed away a couple years ago. So Ross has been recast as Harrison Ford, who is always great. And I can't say it's not like surprisingly effective as to have a reunion between his character and someone else that, yeah, it got me. Like, I was even surprised with myself how much it affected me. Even at the time, I could even know how absurd it was, but I can't deny that it worked. But this is the Marvel story we need right now, and the title could not be more apt for this very dark year. What do we do when the president is a monster? Okay, I'm messing around. That's not number one. It's not even on the list. You should see your face right now. I can somehow see your face right now. So what is at the top of the list? So, I mean, I said it was a comic movie. I didn't say it was a comic book movie. When was the last comedy that made the number one spot? How do I talk about a comedy without just giving the jokes away? What was the last movie that was this gloriously silly? They do show like the first scene in the trailer, and the little girl skips into this hostage situation of the bank robbery. Like, what's going on? And they're like, what are you doing here, little girl? And he pulls off his Mission Impossible mask, grows into the size of Liam Neeson, says an action movie line, and it's just, how did this happen? It doesn't matter, because the movie is just gloriously silly, and it's hilarious. I remember hearing about some of the Reno 911 fellas wanted to make a new Naked Gun movie. I forget their names, Ben Garant and whatever the names were. And they were couching Ed Helms as a possible replacement. And I think that was immediately the wrong approach, because Ed Helms was right for like the adult version of Rusty Griswold, because he can have this sort of childish sincerity in some of his things. But for a Frank Drebin, no, that's way off. Drebin works because he was a dramatic actor who was taking all the nonsense very seriously. Eventually the project moved over to Seth MacFarlane, and he was one who apparently suggested Neeson get in the role, and Akiva Schreiber got into the director's chair, and he was the one who directed the exemplary pop star Never Stop, Never Stoppin'. Casting Liam Neeson in the role was absolutely a masterstroke to lean in on his late career action movies, and to differentiate himself slightly from Leslie Nielsen. Nielsen's hard-boiled detective stuff was an anachronism when they were doing it in the 80s. Doing that sort of thing now would be just repeating the same stuff as before. Naked Gun didn't need a huge change. It just needed a slightly different approach to differentiate it from Nielsen. Paul Walter Hauser does great work as Ed Hawken Jr., who also seems to be unaware of how silly of the movie he's in. He's just sort of marching forward. But that's the rub, isn't it? It's only funny if you take it seriously. But the real revelation here is the deuteragonist, Pamela Anderson. Evidently, she was nearly cast in 33 as a third in the part that eventually went to Anna Nicole Smith. But unlike some other bombshells, Anderson got better as she got older, and she's absolutely hilarious in this role. The fact that this came together so successfully after so long in the oven is a miracle. They're talking about a sequel, and I'm not certain they should risk it like that, but there's also another part of me that's like, well, Naked Gun 2 and 3 aren't really that good either, but I still think they're worth making and worth watching, so like, what the hell? I'm not here to say that the Naked Gun movie is so side-splittingly hilarious that you're going to be peeing yourself when you're watching it, but it is absolutely the most refreshingly fun movie that I saw all year. It's nice to finally put a happy movie at the top of the best list for once. And now, on to the worst list. I should have checked my camera placement before I wore this shirt, but you can't really see. That's the joke this year. You know, pour one out for two real ones that went out last year. I should put Tron Ares in this spot. I really should. That movie spent millions of dollars to try to convince us that Jared Leto was a movie star and that Tron is a franchise. F1 is probably better than Tron Ares was on the whole. But with so many parts of it similar to Top Gun, I can't help but feel like F1 is the most expensive, boring movie ever made. Maybe the fact that the cars lack a third dimension that they can move in makes it boring. It's like, you're doing this. We don't really live in a binary society as it is anymore for the most part, but there are some that still sort of work as a general sense. And one of them for me is for critics who'd rather be bored than annoyed, or would rather be annoyed than bored. I'm the type that would rather be bored than annoyed for the most part, because if something is boring, sometimes it is just like, well, whatever. I mean, for me, this was the rare case where a boring movie actually is just making the list, just for sort of lack of any other, like, really good candidates, and the fact that I spent, like, the 2 hours and whatever sitting through this just being like, okay. It's not as bad as Gran Turismo, I'll say that. Like, it's better than that. And as far as I'm aware, it's not based on a true story, so it sheds that whole thing. It seems very technically competent, but it just didn't turn into anything worth watching. Like, you could sub out one of the other ones I'll put here as far as things I'm saying, like, this could have made the worst list, but X, and put it in here if you like, if you don't think this is a worthy candidate. But with the list, I kept looking and looking and trying to find something else to put here that wouldn't be too repetitive. And I'm like, nah, there's no real other good candidate this time. I barely wrote anything about it. My script is like 2 paragraphs for this one. I need to start writing these things as I go, so that way I'm not, like, desperately trying to figure out what the frick I'm going to say about something. Okay, so they made another goddamn SpongeBob movie. This is an improvement on the third one, at least. I rented that from Netflix back when they were still doing discs, and it's pretty damn bad. This one focuses on the Flying Dutchman, a side character who is newly voiced by Mark Hamill. Kind of sad for Brian Doyle Murray, who originated the role and played it for 25 years. If you don't know the name, he's the voice in, like, Flapjack, and he was the voice of Salty in that one episode of Family Guy, where he's like, I'm Salty, and I've got this complicated fish robot. As far as, like, a voice, like, designed for, like, a sailor, he's great. And Hamill's good in the role, too, although it seems a bit like an impersonation of that. I think the reason they bring Hamill in here is because the plot is about, the Dutchman regaining his body and thus becoming a live-action element, with Hamill playing him in real life. Clancy Brown, the voice of Mr. Krabs, also makes a live-action appearance, and yeah, I'm glad they're having fun. It's really hard just to resent them for this, even though I don't think the movie's really all that good. My favorite parts of the second movie are all the things with Burger Beard, with Antonio Banderas just chewing up the scenery. That was pretty fun. I think maybe the third movie is not as good because it didn't have as much of the multimedia aspect. They have the picture of the fish that reads the news. That's always kind of funny. I'm kind of sad they haven't been focusing much on Plankton, because if I had a favorite character, it probably would be Plankton. I don't really even want to say, well, this is the worst thing that Mark Hamill did this year, because I do actually like his performance playing a grandpa. I think possibly the first time in his career. And it's all kind of harmless. So The Life of Chuck is a Stephen King story set in 3 parts. It starts with some intrigue as far as that the entire world is announcing the retirement of this one particular accountant, and everyone's like, thank you, Chuck, for your retirement, etc. And it puts this pallor over the entire world. But Chuck's retirement seems to be just representing this enormous slowdown, as if entropy itself is disappearing. People disappearing, things are stopping, the whole world is just slowing down. Power is disappearing, there's the lights on the streets, and even the stars are going out. It's not using darkness as a metaphor for encroaching evil. It is just the absence of light. I suppose I won't say what this means, but at the end of this one, we go back and they play the 3 acts in reverse. We start with Act 3, which one I just told you about, and then 2 more acts for the rest of this movie that I don't give a rat's ass about. This movie is diverting at the start. We're not exactly certain what's going on, but when you jump before this happens, it's like, who cares? The only part of the movie that is momentarily diverting is this first part. When it is actually explained, it's so lame. Maybe I'm just not old enough to have certain opinions about certain things, certain times in my life or whatever. Not old enough to feel ways about stuff, as they used to say. But this movie is 1/3 intrigue that they didn't really earn, and then 2/3 schmaltz. Maybe this could have benefited from a different kind of script or something. The way that like Cloud Atlas's original thing was like first chapter, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and it's everything in the very far future after the fall is all set at once, and then it goes back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I don't know if that would have worked for a movie, so them scrambling it up to make a different adaptation probably saved that. I mean, I'm one of these crazies who likes Cloud Atlas, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is maybe a massive restructure might have assisted this as far as we get to see the gradual surprises in these three things gradually all at once. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, isn't that just The Fountain? Like, and that movie stinks. I don't care what anyone says. This is feel-good entertainment. I felt good when I left. Bazam! Bazingo! Boom! Okay, this is another sort of hesitant entry on the worst list, although this is a much worse movie than the first two I talked about. And there is a much worse action movie higher up on the list that's similar in a lot of ways, but we'll talk about that later. I almost gave a spot to Love Hurts, which is the Ke Huy Quan follow-up movie, which is more action-focused and relying on his skills like that. And the choreography in the fight scenes is pretty good, but it's usually not really shot in a way that sort of you can see what's going on or whatever. So it seems like something that would have been made by someone who knows action choreography without necessarily understanding action photography, you know? And yeah, like the story isn't good, and you wouldn't normally think about this, but it's because the action is so weak, you kind of hope the story would contextualize a little bit of this. And then, like, I know Ke Huy Quan, he skews a little younger than he actually is, but the romance between him and the other girl, I'm like, I have no idea how old she is, but she's, I think, a little too young to be doing this sort of stuff. And her performance is kind of weird. She got nominated for a Razzie for something, I think for West Side Story. I don't know why they're picking on her, but I don't think her performance is good here. Earlier in the year, there was Flight Risk, which was set in a plane with only 3 people on the plane, set on the plane for almost the entire duration of the movie. There's simply too few moving parts with these 3 people in the plane for this to technically be successful. And like, at the end of the day, I don't think I even really like it. But I have to admit that Cleaner is worse than this for reasons we'll get into. Daisy Ridley, who I really like a lot, and I wish she was in better stuff, and she can be a real charmer when she's allowed to be. So Ridley is an ex-British Special Forces, and she's got a job as a window cleaner, I guess because she's fearless. So she's out there washing the windows as terrorists zip in and take control of the building that she's on. And boy, does this movie ever overestimate how much time I want to spend with the terrorists rather than her. The action is directed better than Love Hurts when there is action to be had. The problem is just Daisy Ridley spends almost the whole movie outside on the swing stage scaffolding. She needed to get off the thing much sooner and be able to get out there and influence what's happening on the inside. It's sad to see Martin Campbell make a worse list when Gibson is surely a more worthy target, but it is what it is. The wiki says, see also Die Hard. Yeah, so how long did John McClane spend outside that building? Was it 80% of the movie, or was it just enough? I don't seem to remember. And yeah, Cleaner picks up towards the end when she's finally in there, and she's allowed to do these action set pieces with a tiny Daisy Ridley is able to take out these bigger guys. But that's what I'm there for. If you're going to do this, I'm like, yeah, if you're going to do this, let's do it. And there is one little wrinkle. It's the most surprising sudden death of a character played by a noteworthy actor in a movie like this since Mindhunters. The audacity of some of the stuff in here almost kept it off the worst list, but I have to give more credit to Flight Risk for when it was in its little bottle being a little more interesting. A moving plane is simply more interesting than Daisy Ridley being stuck in a little box for an hour. With the exception of Tom Hanks, nobody ever has a good follow-up to their Oscar win, which is one of the reasons I cannot wait for The Odyssey. I'm like, oh, is this going to go so wrong? I'm waiting for it. Not that I want Nolan to be knocked down a peg, but I'm just like, he'll never have as much clout as he does right then. He already had a lot of it. So this is where he's going to make his biggest, most ponderous nonsense, and I'm like, ooh, can't wait. Mickey 17 is a science fiction film set in 2054? Okay, not certain we're going to have human cloning by then, but that's part of the story, so... It's based on a book. The book was called Mickey 7, as there were only 7 versions of him had been created at that point. The point of it is you volunteer for this process where they can copy you. If you die in a dangerous mission, you can come back. And they make it all sound like this is horrible, whatever, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, job's a job. I mean... So in the movie version, they increased it by 10 to, I guess, imply that there's more danger, but also, like, most of them are just killed in this one montage at the front. So I'm like, I don't even know if we see all 17 go down. It just seems sort of completely arbitrary to change it. I don't mind using science fiction for, like, social commentary. God knows I don't. Take Moon from a long time ago. It's a man on a long-term lunar mission who has to reflect back on his 3-year mission and how much it has worn on him. The old, tired curmudgeon has to look upon the bright-eyed dimwit who agreed to this toil in the first place. For Mickey 17, the message is like, colonialism is bad, exploitation is bad, capturing aliens is bad, which is all fine, you know, but if I wanted that, I could just watch Avatar. I did not watch Avatar. I didn't watch the second one. I'm certainly watching the third one. I'm not watching the fourth one. I'm probably not going to watch the fifth one. We'll see if we even get that far. Let's just be really real here. It's such cinematic waste for a story that was just completely lost from page to screen. These aren't messages that need science fiction encryption to sort of get them out into the masses. Look at all this injustice. Look at all these fools who pretend to run the show. Look, I know this was all happening before a bad guy got back onto the toilet seat, but this is still so lame. Some of you have pointed out that the supporters of the bad guy in this movie wear red hats. I don't remember noticing that. Mark Ruffalo at least has a good sense to not be doing a direct impression. It's more about an attitude. There's a point where our hero Mickey collapses during a fancy dinner in a private thing, and Ruffalo does not seem apparently that concerned about the whole thing. But there's no way that life would imitate that art, huh? Oh boy. It isn't by doing anything except being very direct about why what is happening now is unacceptable just ain't enough anymore. Then we have this nonsense ending where just because we had one bad guy blow up and apparently everything else crumbled after him. I mean, that's a nice fantasy. Let's hope it works out. But even so, at one point, they're like, okay, well, we've seen this. This is bad. And I guess in that interim, they've decided that Yahweh is real again. And thus, cloning is indeed a sin and not like any other technology where it's just neutral until used. Any filmmaker that trades in this kind of sophistry has no hidden wisdom to reveal. According to Wikipedia, this film differs from the novel, meaning the novel sequel, Antimatter Blues, cannot be adapted into a film. Oh, thank God! I mean, they lost $80 million on this movie, so I don't think they were going to do it. Good, fuck them! Eternity is so bogus. I get the absurdity of, like, that the afterlife is just a regular life, but with even more finality, except the finality isn't just death, it's just you have to pick one particular afterlife to exist in forever and ever. And just because of strong personality conflicts, this one girl has to pick one of the 2 people that she loved in her life in order to go with. It's like, what are you going into, like a 1-bedroom apartment? Is that where it is? You're going to be right on top of each other? Get a cabin somewhere and just visit them. Go back and forth every other day. Why is this an issue? But no, I guess she has to choose who the love of her life is.
Okay, so for the rest of eternity, you have to either choose Miles Teller or...
I take the other guy.
I didn't even say the other guy yet.
Yeah, whatever.
The other guy is just a bunch of wet logs we had behind the barn.
I said what I said. So this is just hell, right? Everyone just goes to hell no matter if you were good or bad? Sounds about right. What are people here going to even do when they have a polycules and the bus rolls over and they all have to figure out who they get to stay with, who they get to choose? Oh, and yet this is still more interesting and meaningful than anything that happened in A Big Badass Song of the South, or whatever the frig this movie was called. You're going to think I'm making this up, but 2 people meet cute in a Burger King and decide to go on a road trip together because they found out that they rented their car from the same place. They encounter a Matrix door in the middle of nowhere that takes them back to moments that are in their life that are allegedly meaningful. We see little pieces of their life, but they never can come quite together into something convincing or illuminating or even something interesting. A few times these adults have been brought back into moments in their childhood and they want to change things based on their, their knowledge or whatever, or wanting to have another chance at something that they failed at. And of course, this only results in them making everything worse. It is so awkward. All of this is contrived in such a self-conscious way that the movie literally might as well have pulled them onto a stage with giant vaudeville canes. Like, Eternity sucks, but compared to this movie and compared to the next movie on the worst list, I at least get why you would make a movie like Eternity to try to express the irreconcilable conflicts that involve an eternal afterlife. Let's just say Charlie Brown gets the eternity afterlife. Does he find the red-headed girl? No, she's off with her husband and their kids or whatever. And it's like, so where does Charlie Brown go? I don't know. Fuck him, I guess. Thank goodness none of that is real, and we all cease to exist when we die. Hug your pets, everybody. They're not waiting for you. They're not waiting for you any more than all the burgers you ate are waiting for you. A Big, Bold, Beautiful Journey isn't even as interesting or romantic as Materialists, which is a bad movie, but at least it has characters and it has things that people do. I mean, that movie, like, really seriously stinks, but at least it was earnest. And it was about putting people through a single set of events, as unpredictable and weird as they are. Materials had Dakota Johnson in it, and someone I know compared her career trajectory to Nicolas Cage, and I'm like, oh, I hope so. She didn't have to go bankrupt, and I think based on her family, I don't think she will, but nevertheless, I mean, happened to Nick Cage and his family too, whatever. Like, the fact is, I want her to make some weird choices and want her to do the weirdest, dumbest movies imaginable. Like, just go for it, Dakota Johnson. Have fun. I like Colin Farrell and I like Margot Robbie, but not here. This one just wasn't meant to be. The screenwriter of this, I just saw this, wrote The Menu. Oh boy. And look, like, at least The Menu was more straightforward than this. This must have been dusted off after that got sold and been like, yeah, sure, this is something I wrote when I was 17 or something, where this is deep. Holy moly. Alright, we're beginning to develop like a subgenre, which you might as well call the A24 movies, because they're usually the ones responsible for this, where very slimly budgeted movies about odd situations that sort of just smother you in intrigue. With Opus, we have a young journalist going out to a compound with some other people who've been invited specifically to this place where a reclusive folk singer has not been seen for 30 years. But things are not quite what they seem, except they totally are what they seem. Because this whole place is just so very weird, because this guy is rich and is allowed to be weird, and the whole thing stinks to high heaven. And it's not just that yurt that's filled with oysters that they have for some weird reason. You wonder if, like, our reclusive folk singer is going to turn out to be like a Wendigo or something. Something really weird. Or maybe the madman is working on something, like, big on a level that we can't even perceive, like he's talking to people in another dimension or something. Well, the plan that eventually hatched from this is about as deep as you might expect from the first-time director if they were a high schooler. None of the intrigue pays off at all, and everything bad happens because a bunch of weak-willed people worship someone they shouldn't. Like, a lot of movies like this have sort of these slightly hidden meanings in them. Obviously, after, like, Get Out, a lot of people were trying to do things like this, and with Get Out, it's like, yeah, this is a unique perspective on this sort of life, you know, inspired by his discomfort at giant waspy events like this. So there was something there. As far as this is like the whole thing, what it's all coming down to, I don't see this being a metaphor for like working in the entertainment industry or music groupies or anything like this. I just don't see what the reason for telling this was. And when you hear like what the plan was, maybe the title gives it away, but oh gosh, who did that? Maybe the next title gives it away too. You won't believe that crap. It's fun seeing Io Edebiri in something that isn't a cartoon. And John Malkovich can make things compelling in his sleep for a little while when he's allowed to, but even with its weak setup, it has a pitiful payoff, if you want to call it that. I'm sorry, guys. There are no pearls in these oysters. There was a movie that came out in January called Inheritance that was evidently shot entirely on iPhones. It has real actors in it, or at least a few. It does look a little less filmy than some things that were shot with real, like, big boy cameras, but it still looks better than things that were shot on, like, DV tape and things. If you didn't necessarily know that, you might just think the movie's kind of weird looking, and Inheritance is probably a little more exciting than Black Bag, which looks beautiful and is nicely written, but is so boring. Some people call it a slow burn thriller. I called it a no burn thriller. Neither of those made the list because of their other relative virtues. Now, The Ruse is a seriously amateurish movie that I might have not put on the list if it hadn't been put out into a regular theater. But this guy's been doing movies since 2003, so you'd think eventually he'd get good at it, but I don't know. Our main character is a nurse who was brought in to help a bedridden woman. But things get a little weird, and what could possibly be going on here except the title might be giving part of the game away. That didn't happen with Shut-In. Say what you will about Shut-In, like, that title doesn't give away what happens in that one. So normally I wouldn't kick like a little movie like this down, but what really got to me was, at the end of the movie, our hero has been like put in prison for something that didn't really happen in there, and then the male cop character has to solve the mystery for her while she's trapped and save her. I'm like, you couldn't have possibly given this revelation to the protagonist, like, so that she can be the one to untangle this, even if she's doing it in the jail cell and she's saying, wait, what about this? And then they have to go and do everything while she's in there. At least give her the agency to, like, you know, affect the end of the plot that she's in. I mean, this comes across really sexist. So I think it was last year, maybe it was this year, I legit don't remember. Indiana Jones 5 ends with a point, I didn't talk about it at all, whatever year that was, but this decision that Indy wants to make at the end of that movie, but then her younger female co-star knocks him out and deprives him of the ability to make that decision. And look, you could say things like he was being a little bit silly at that moment, or he needed to be with his family, or Snake, you'll create a time paradox. But really, that decision should have been his, shouldn't it have been? Could we possibly have, like, left that with our protagonist? That was just slimy. I'll stick up for that character a lot in that movie, although she does needlessly cause trouble for Indy throughout a lot of that, so I get why some people hate her. But that's the one time I was like, no, I don't like this. Like, leave him some agency, please. But yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about the cop and saving the girl in this movie, taking it all away from our protagonist. It's so slimy. This movie doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. It's just completely not noteworthy. You know, normally the worst list is easier to make than the best list. Not this year. The worst movies just aren't bad in very interesting ways. It's not like with Joker, where one of 15 minutes just ripped that movie to pieces. No, this is just a conga line of total incompetence. I had way more to say about that Nicolas Cage movie. What was it called? The Retirement Plan. Yeah, that was literally like a movie had rolled out of a red box and appeared in a thing. I have no idea what that was doing in a movie theater. That's like going to like an expensive steakhouse and seeing a hot dog cart. I don't have anywhere else to put this, so we're just going to talk about it here. Ella McKay was filmed in my home state of Rhode Island. Weirdly, it seems to even concern Rhode Island itself, although the state is never named, because the governor leaves their post to go join the cabinet of the president, and the lieutenant governor steps in and becomes governor. This is the part of it that makes me think that maybe this script didn't sit around for like 50 years, because otherwise this movie seems pretty old-fashioned, with the exception of some technology that's been added in there. At least our real governor didn't get in a not that tawdry sex scandal, thank God. Watching this story about the lieutenant governor makes you wish that Robert Healy was still alive. Now there's a joke nobody but locals are gonna get. Zing! Ella McKay is really weird, but kind of not on purpose. It's like the main character is charming. And I'll say it is really nice to see Julie Kavner back in a live-action role. And she's certainly doing this one for the money, let's just say. At least I hope not. It's nice to hear her real voice again. You know, even with a weak, worst list like this really can't go on here. I just don't have any anger for it. Where was I? Oh yeah, Riff Raff. So this is a dark comedy that's clearly been heavily inspired by Tarantino. But the worst thing Tarantino has ever done has got to be better than this weak soup. It's a decent ensemble, but they never get to do anything in this. The movie is very violent and very not funny. I normally probably give this one a rewatch since I barely remember what happened. It's about an elderly man and his son getting threatened by an ex, and some of the darker fellows from the past sort of come back into the periphery. This all comes to a head in this one scene where everyone's in the living room with some shocking violence, and it's absolutely amazing how utterly weightless all this is. You weren't going to see this anyway, so spoilers, I guess, if you really give a crap. I mean, I said it was inspired by Tarantino, so it's no shock that a lot of people get shot in the end. But at the end, a lot of people get shot, and the only two people who actually suffer, like, permanent consequences for that are the two really bad guys. Everyone else kind of shrugs it off, I guess, because it's like as if they got hit with a softball or something. It's simultaneously grotesquely cruel and violent, and entirely toothless. Maybe it's high time we just let Bill Murray go. He's not going to start caring anytime soon. Yeah, Flight Risk isn't the worst movie of 2025 with the word flight in the title. Thus you can see why I was struggling to find a way to put that one on the list. Fight or Flight is an attempt to make a John Wick style thing inside of a flying airplane. Josh Hartnett gained a lot of capital with me with Trap, a movie that not everyone was behind, but he has squandered all of it in this remarkably bad action movie. Hartnett is a marked man who was trying to save this one particular woman who was trying to get out of this dangerous country, but evidently when he was talking or something, Hartnett didn't have private browsing on, so apparently everyone on this plane is some sort of exotic contract killer. It makes me look back on like Bullet Train and think, man, maybe I was way too hard on Bullet Train. They at least seemed like characters in a movie that was telling a story, and Train can only go in one direction. It's even less than F1 with that, where you can actually drive around things. I guess you're on a track, I guess. Maybe they're kind of the same thing. And that action was at least reasonably well done. Not here, I'm afraid. There's been plenty of John Wick wannabes that have come through here that I haven't put on worst lists, but this one does something that is truly unforgivable. Okay, spoilers for the end of this movie, but that's the rub, isn't it? So, our hero and their charge do eventually sort of get to the ground, though what happens is the plane is disabled, they're going down, our hero faints. They wake up, they're on the ground, and once they wake up, the charge is like, come on, Josh Hartnett, we can't stay here. We're not out of danger. So not only do we not see how they got out of the air and onto the ground, once they get there, the story isn't even over. They have to keep running. This movie literally doesn't have an ending. And based on its terrible box office performance, I don't think we're going to get a sequel either. So this story just does not go anywhere. Look, Bride Hard is a bad movie. Not quite bad enough, I think, to warrant 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. But there's a moment where Rebel Wilson is like swinging around a hair curler as a pair of nunchaku, and one of the heavies tries catching it, apparently unaware what it is, and burns his hand on it. I forget if the guy was like bald and just had no idea, never seen one, didn't grow up with a sister or a mother, I guess. It's a little odd to think that he doesn't know, but it's not impossible. And I think that is actually kind of a funny gag, you know? As far as all the Die Hard likes I watched this year, I liked it better than Flight Risk, Cleaner, or this. And you know what? At least Bride Hard had an ending. What's clear is that Trap was greatly buoyed by Hartnett's compelling performance. This time, nothing can be done to save this smug, mean-spirited counterfeit. Fight or Flight, more like poop or pee. I'm not working any harder than they did on their ending. F*** 'em. They finally did it. They pulled the same trick 3 times. We have 3 brand new magicians who are just as shallow and obnoxiously written as the original Horsemen, but don't happen to be anyone I can give a crap about. I don't even know who these people are. Well, I know who Justice Smith is. Man, first to worst, that's a devastating drop for him. But the other 2, not certain why I'm supposed to tolerate the smugness from these teenagers, essentially. And we have another capitalist who have to steal money from for the good of others because, ? She's not related to the Michael Caine character from the first, so I guess he just finally decided not to do this anymore. So why is this the worst movie of the year? You know what, if the 4 horsemen don't have to explain their tricks, neither do I. Thank you all for watching. Alright, I'll explain it. I want to be better than these fools. So if you don't know, the 4 horsemen are alleged anti-capitalist stage magicians who try to correct financial wrongs. In the first movie, they had this trick where they were using a light to make like invisible ink appear on these checks that had been apparently taken from the bank account of the main bad guy. This is all on stage with the guy there in person. And when they start talking about this guy's thing, even though the money's come from his account, the people in the audience start booing him. And I'm like, so hold on, it's like he's either in on this or he's not. And if he's in on it, he's giving you the money and maybe you don't want to boo. Or if he's not in on it, then it's just regular theft and maybe you don't want to be party to this. So it's one of these things where it's like, who wrote this? A freaking space alien? Like, how is this the way this is going down? I don't know if any crowd would actually react like the way they do in the first movie. But really, that's not the problem I have with the Horsemen in general. If you know anything about real stage magic, you'll start to notice that in movies about that, when they start not showing you something, it's always on purpose. It's sort of the opposite of the way real stage magicians do. Every move a magician makes is on purpose, even if it's just a misdirection. Why can't we see this one particular guard's face? Because it would ruin the trick. That crap don't work in real life in a real stage because they don't know where you might be looking. Do you guys remember the Amazing Burt Wonderstone? So there was a trick where somebody stands over here, another person stands up here on the gallows and falls. But the thing is, though, the camera pans in, you lose track of this guy. And at some point, where this person has never left stage, this person switches with this guy, when there's simply no way for that to have actually happened. But even if you couldn't necessarily see what happened to this guy because they zoomed in over here, left him behind, and do this. And it's like, this trick wouldn't work if it was acted on stage where you get to see all the pieces all at once. There's ways you can kind of trade places like that without it being super obvious, but this trick just simply is impossible. This series of movies has always had a serious problem about simply not knowing the first thing about actual stage magic. The heist in the opening of the first movie was, for the most part, almost entirely plausible, except for the weird CG curtain that swoops around everything and just makes you think like, well, this isn't possible. Like, what is going on here? If they'd made like a thing where it's like, oh, it's actually a curtain that's sort of flying around on a gimbal and just erase the wires or whatever so it didn't look so utterly phony like CGI. If they'd done some sort of real curtain, I would have just given it to them. I'm like, okay, this is probably some sort of wind trick or something, or something like that. But when it's CGI, it's like, well, that's obviously just not really happening. Or the freezing the raindrop trick. They have it in the first one. They show it in a magic shop, and they show it later, where if you strobe light a bunch of like droplets falling from a thing, they can appear to freeze in air. And so they do this on a larger scale where they have rainmakers and they freeze the rain in place using the strobe lights. The thing is, though, at least that one works in principle, but one, I don't think rainmakers make, very even raindrops. Maybe they do. But also, if you're standing under the fake rain and you see the raindrops frozen, you're gonna still feel rain because what you're seeing is a different raindrop in almost the identical position that was there a fraction of a second later as things drop very consistently. That's the way that trick works. So in real life, if you're there and the rain freezes, you're gonna still feel it as it actually hits your shoulders. Is that the metaphor we've been driving at this entire time? It doesn't matter what you feel, it only matters what you see? And the tricks in these movies have only gotten worse and worse from the first one. Even the magic that John Heder does in When in Rome is more convincing than the magic tricks here. By this entry, the Horsemen's tricks almost all use CGI to do stuff that is just impossible. What do I have written here? Like they change outfits, or they teleport around, or they shred a playing card and turn it into a giant field of snow. That's just way too much material. If this was meant to be that somehow, like, they have access to an earnest magic world that lets them do whatever they want. I mean, they keep having their threat about talking about the eye, but they still never explain what the eye is. Evidently, all these things are supposed to actually be actual tricks. But this is written by dumbasses who don't understand how magic actually works and think they can just do the same trick over and over and over. For the third time, the horsemen pull off their stupid heist. They get promised that they're going to be folded further into the eye, which they still don't explain anything about, and they sequel bait. Okay, The Bad Guys 2, stay with me please. The Bad Guys 2 didn't make the best list this year, although it is still pretty dang good. And the huge, muscly, like, Panther girl who's, like, the main antagonist, she really bakes my potato, at least in a design sense. Her personality is just kind of boring. It's not enough for me. The Bad Guys 2, at least, explains the heists in something like a reasonable way they could have been pulled off, and allows the heists to go wrong so they can be forced to improvise. In contrast, the Horsemen always anticipate everything and never can realistically fail. If they eventually just reveal they are just legitimately psychohistorians who can just see the future in a way that we don't understand, like that at least would be an explanation. The Now You See Me series doesn't let you enjoy either the heists or the stage magic, get the worst halves of both. They're just immature fantasies of omnipotence and lionizing this literal performative anti-capitalism. The director, Ruben Fleischer, who has never made a single movie worth a damn, that includes Zombieland, Fight Me in Real Life, Behind the Taco Bell, I Don't Care, and evidently his career only exists to keep Woody Harrelson and Jesse Eisenberg off the dole. And he wants to make a sequel to this movie, apparently so we do it all over again just like Teletubbies. Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci were producers on this film. They apparently produced the first one, and in 2014 they said they would stop working on movies together and focus mostly on television. They still made Now You See Me 2 in 2016, and their names are listed as producers on this movie in 2025. Roberto Orci passed away last year at the age of 51. So no matter how many horsemen we have now, nobody can put this duo back together. But what do you do for an encore? Alex Kurtzman is the man who single-handedly destroyed Star Trek. It's true. It's on his Wikipedia page. I don't care if it's been reverted by the time this video goes up. I got a screenshot of it. You can't hide the truth.
Haven't got a new calendar yet. So, real quick, I wanted to add one more thing about Cleaner, which, like, I always forget things like this when I write them down. And I'm always like, in the next year, I'm like, oh, let me talk about this, let me talk about that, let me bring stuff back up. But Cleaner's not noteworthy enough to bother with this with, so I'm just going to do it here in a quick thing. Spoilers for Cleaner. Honestly, Cleaner's probably good enough to watch on Tubi or something if it gets there. But nevertheless, like, it's still pretty bad. Maybe you can fast forward through the incredible and stupid fatty middle. So anyway, like I said, this movie spends way too much time with the terrorist characters in the thing as if we give a crap about these, like, you know, idiots and psychos. The main bad guys are, like, eco-terrorists. They want to, like, save the world from companies who are hurting the planet. But then they find out that their leader has been lying to them, and he's an earnest Malthusian who wants to remove all humanity from Earth. I don't even know that would be Malthusian if it would be just anti-humanism or something. And it's one of them things where it's like, yeah, like, this must have been written at a point where this wasn't super tedious. So the point is just not that in Die Hard, they are people pretending to be terrorists who are just actual thieves as a distraction. In Cleaner, they are actual terrorists who want to be more terroristic than they thought. And it's like, yeah, no, the twist in Die Hard was that they were, you know, in the politically charged time of the 80s, it's like, oh, but these people aren't actually political, they just want money. Well, this one's like, no, not only do they want to save the Earth, they want to save Earth from humans. It's like, this is such a lame way to do it. It's like, it's not really that hard to follow the template of Die Hard, although with how many Die Hard-alikes have made it to my worst list, maybe it is. I don't know.
Beneath contempt. Maybe this movie got off on the wrong foot with me because the main character is one of these 80s pro gamer guys who we now know are all frauds and con artists and the worst kinds of people. And the week this came out, maybe like a couple days before this, we had one of those particular fellas winning a lawsuit against someone who was criticizing him. And look, that might have been the right move, like, legally, because maybe he finally said something he shouldn't have, whatever, he should have watched his mouth. But that doesn't necessarily mean this was the ending that we wanted, for this guy to be enriched for the tune of another six-figure hit for this whole thing. And, like, yeah, you know, like, this guy who this happened to, you know, maybe he knocked over the life of someone that I liked, but I still didn't want this to happen. Yeah, I don't particularly sympathize with this guy for upturning people's lives for crap that he thinks he understands. But that doesn't mean I wanted the other guy to win. You know, it's not like when a certain political gadfly, who is now gone, thank God, I hope we never see her again, finally turned against Daddy and then crumbled the second the force was on her shoulders. What a wimp. A movie about the most important video game since Doom, Myst, you know, it's been a bit, and the most important creative video game ever made. And what do we get? We get this incredibly bogus isekai that would have been laughed off of a reboot of Sliders. Can't possibly just make the story about an actual adventure or about actual survival, because we have to keep cutting back to the real world where a villager's appeared and is now dating the principal. Mario and some of these movies get imprinted by what the celebrities want to do. Do you think Bowser was going to sing in the original version of this before Jack Black took on the role of Bowser? Like, probably not. And that is really kind of the weakest part of that movie. You know, not that the singing is bad. This is all the tail wagging the dog at this point. But now there isn't even a dog. There is just a tail. There is just celebrity vanity to indulge. We get an entire world to explore, and what do we get? Nether's Got Talent. How could the youth of these days gobble this up when they're the ones who keep complaining about cringe? This is like if cringe had a cringe, I would think. If this is what the youth actually like, then I'm glad the future's going to be bad for them. I'm not going to stop recycling to make certain that the future for them is just a little bit worse. Jared Hess should be in a Guatemalan prison somewhere. Not for anything he did as a personal person. I mean specifically for this. For this movie. The only good thing about this movie was that it inspired YouTube chef B.W. Babish to actually attempt to cook chicken with lava. And you know what's the funny thing is it doesn't work. Not that it incinerates the chicken and it just blackens immediately. No, the chicken was raw because the water in the chicken would evaporate and create a protective layer of steam that actually insulated it from the heat of the lava. So yeah, that don't work. That's right, this movie is unrealistic. Move on to my mark. I wonder if this'll show up. Oh no, I'm drinking void. I'm gonna use a picture. This is my dating profile. Yeah. When my doctor asked me how many chicken nuggets I had, I'm gonna change the subject. Best 9, one of those days. It's just one of those days. Everything sucks. I don't know how the song goes.